Welcome to Chapter 5 of Hogwarts Bouquet. This is the second half of the double upload. Plus, again, I have one more coming on Sunday, and then another one next week. Chapter 5 is titled Another Flower for the Bouquet. This is Chapter 5 of Hogwarts Bouquet by ElizabethEmerald on AO3. We have to get this girl to a mind healer, Poppy declared. The past week, as they had approached Rose's birthday, had been eventful. She seemed to be healing, at least physically, as well as possible, considering the state of her injuries. Rose was even gaining weight again with the help of the nutrient potions, though she still had a long way to go. However, her overwhelming fear and anxiety had only become more pronounced. Any time Rose was startled or upset, there were powerful bouts of accidental magic. Sometimes, the waves of Muggle repellent were powerful enough to affect even the two witches. And her magic was adapting very quickly to the other spells that existed in a magical house. Yesterday, she nearly blasted the wallpaper off the walls with a powerful cleaning spell. We both have training with the basics of mind healing. I know that when she starts feeling safer here, these magical attacks might get stronger or more frequent. I'm worried about what could happen when she begins attending Hogwarts. Other students could get hurt, or she could burn herself out completely. Minerva sighed, rubbing her brow. Unlike Poppy, she didn't have the excuse of a family emergency, so she had been flying back and forth to Hogwarts every day to maintain her cover. You're right, of course. For her safety and the safety of those around her, we need to find some way to get her some help. The question is, how will we find a mind healer who can keep her secrets? We can't just have Rose lie to the healer. She won't benefit from the healer if she has to hide parts of herself. I can subtly ask a few of my contacts from before I worked at Hogwarts. I should be able to find someone who can be trusted to maintain patient confidentiality. If only we could find some excuse for why Rose Pomfrey has the same trauma as Rose Potter. Both women paused to watch Rose play in the garden, and it seemed that playing in the garden was really code for gardening. Despite them insisting again and again that Rose didn't have to earn her place with them, she seemed dedicated to proving that she was helpful. Maybe she did genuinely enjoy working in the garden, and the overgrown garden certainly did benefit from the care and attention. Minerva suddenly snapped her fingers. Actually, Phileas may have accidentally given us the perfect excuse, she said. Poppy turned to face her fully. During today's meeting, he asked after you, and I said you may have a relative coming to stay at the castle. I was trying to keep the reasoning vague, so he assumed what I meant. He seemed to think that your brother's child was ill and may pass soon. As dark as that thought is, we could certainly use it to our advantage. Poppy thought for a moment. If we tell the staff that Rose was traumatized by the death of her parent, which is probably true anyways, yes indeed, then it would be completely understandable to try and get her mind healing, and hopefully people wouldn't be so uncouth to ask about her past. Poppy idly tangled her fingers in Minnie's hair as she spoke. Minerva leaned into the soft caress, her eyes fluttering shut for a moment before snapping open again. And any future mishaps with her accidental magic could be explained away as a bad reaction from her memory or trigger. The staff would treat her with sympathy rather than curiosity, and her staying with you for the year would make more sense. If she had recently lost someone, no one would expect her not to live with her family. Yes, but first, before we do that, I'll find a mind healer. Finding a mind healer that would work for Rose was both easier and harder than they had expected. Most of the mind healers that Poppy had talked to were equally dedicated to maintaining patient confidentiality. They knew that there was no way for the mind healing to be effected if their patient didn't trust them. However, there were only a few who had experience with the level of trauma that Rose had dealt with. In the end, they chose one of Poppy's friends from her school years, Dr. Maisie Cooper. had both the experience and professional moral to help Rose. Rose took a few visits to start to trust Dr. Cooper, which they had all expected after what she had gone through. It was the week before her 10th birthday that the doctor had sat down Minerva and Poppy to discuss the journey Rose's recovery would be. As I'm sure you've guessed, she has severe PTSD. It manifests as generalized anxiety with more severe reactions when she is surprised. These reactions will likely last the rest of her life, even with working with me for years. Dr. Cooper told them. Minerva nodded. How would we recommend we move forward? Poppy gave a tight smile. Her and Minerva were women of action. If there was a problem, they would seek a solution. They would discuss their feelings about the difficulty ahead of Rose later in private. However, now they needed to be strong to help her. For one thing, I don't think that her helping around the house is a bad thing. Yes, her relatives treated her like a slave and punished her when she didn't do a good enough job. However, it does give her something she has control over. Allow her the choice of what she wants to help out with. Then when she does a good job, tell her so. When there is room for improvement, remind her that she isn't going to be punished or beaten for it. Both women nodded at her words. They had noted that Rose really seemed to enjoy helping out. They knew that they would just have to remind her that she didn't have to earn kindness by helping out. Another thing that I think would help her a lot would be a service animal, Dr. Cooper continued. A larger animal that would help her feel safe and protected. One trained in bringing her down from anxiety attacks, so as trained in a blocking posture. So then the animal could warn her when someone was coming up behind her and keep people from touching her without her permission. Poppy nodded while Minerva looked thoughtful. If we help her perform a familiar ritual on the service animal, we would be able to get around Hogwarts regulations on the type of animal, meaning she wouldn't have to be separated from it. Minerva said, That's true. That's actually something we recommend patients in need of service animals do. As long as they have the magical power to maintain the bond. Making their service animal their familiar allows the animal to be more intelligent and more attuned to their needs and emotions. And young Rose certainly has the power, without question. So when can we pick out an animal? Of the various trained service animals available, Poppy and Minerva quickly sorted through the best ones for Rose. Unfortunately for Minerva, it seemed that the best option was going to be service dog. Well, she never really got along especially well with dogs. There weren't any cats that had all the traits they needed. In the end, they took Rose to meet a small handful of dogs on her 10th birthday. The dogs were lined up for her to interact with each one. It would be important that their personalities worked well together, not just because the dog would be her service animal, but also because it would be her familiar. Standing in the line was a golden retriever, an English bulldog, a German shepherd, and a black Labrador. Rose seemed to like the golden retriever well enough, and Poppy felt that Rose would have likely similar attributes to the dog when she was older. Rose seemed to like the golden retriever well enough, and Poppy felt that Rose would likely have similar attributes to the dog when she was older. Minerva muttered something to the effect that Poppy had the real golden retriever personality. The English bulldog almost caused another magic panic attack, Rose eventually revealing that her Aunt Marge had a bulldog named Ripper that used to terrorize her. After that scare, she reacted mostly indifferently to the German shepherd. The black lab, however, immediately caught and held her attention. The dog was easily the largest of the room, even only at 2 years old. Rose seemed to have some warm connection to the large black dog that the other witches could only puzzle at. But they were both happy that Rose was able to find a dog that worked for her. "What will you name her, Rose?" Poppy asked. Rose took a long moment to seriously consider the dog's name, just as she had with her own. "Posy. Her name will be Posy. Sticking with the flower theme, Minerva said with a slight chuckle. "Okay, Rosie and Posy," Poppy smiled. "What a perfect combo." Rose smiled even wider, kneeling down and hugging Posy to her. That day they left with Posy and everything needed to care for her. Rose revealed that this was actually the first time she'd gotten a present for her birthday, to the heartbreak of the two elder witches. When they returned to Minerva's cottage, they prepared for the ritual that would create a familiar bond between Posy and Rose. The ritual was one of the few that could be cast for someone else. It was actually fairly common for magical families to bond their child to a familiar to help protect them before they had access to and control of their own magic, especially if the child was powerful or prone to bouts of accidental magic. The familiar could help provide a grounding force for the child as well as alert the parents if the child was in danger. Later, when Rose came into her own magic, she would be able to strengthen the bond if she chose. A fully realized familiar bond gave a lot of benefits for the witch or wizard, though the amount of magical power that was required to form the bond discouraged most magic folk from committing to it. Poppy and Minerva, powerful witches in their own right, stood facing each other on opposite sides of a circle with Rose and Posy in the middle. They each had their wands out, pointing to their right. They connected their magic, forming a ring around the girl and her dog. Rose reacted immediately, her magic flaring to life, filling the circle she was in. Posy threw her head back and howled, not in pain or fear, but joy. Rose matching her with her own rising laughter. The witches brought their wands back to center, now facing each other over Rose's head. With a snap and a flash, Rose's magic shone with a brilliant light before clamping onto Posy. They could both see the magic weaving between the two before it settled and faded from view. Posy was changed by the ritual. An inherent part of the familiar ritual would be that the familiar in question would take on a more magical nature, matching the soul of its mistress. Posy had grown larger, now closer in height to a wolfhound, and her fur almost seemed to fade into fog before solidifying again. Even Posy's eyes seemed to glow with a brilliant red light. "By Merlin," Poppy gasped, "she looks like a Grim." "Well, at least wizards will know not to touch her," Minerva said very seriously. They watched as Rose started to pet Posy, the big dog, now shifting into a more mundane form, like a marginally larger than normal Labrador. Minerva could already see the keen intelligence of the familiar, and knew that Rose would be well served and well protected as her service animal. Thank you for listening to this chapter. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.